Welcome to Chit-Chat with Gemini Moons. I'm Sue Hillyard and am joined by Robin Grabfelder and Michelle Dench. And today's episode came about after the shocking announcement of Matthew Perry's death, almost exactly concurrent with the lunar eclipse at 5 degrees Taurus this past Saturday. The astrological correlations with his chart were enough that we decided to chit-chat about it and other things. But first, some background about Matthew. From Rolling Stone on 10/28/23, they said a spokesperson for the Los Angeles Police Department said that police responded at 4:10 this afternoon to a death investigation for a male in his 50s. While an official cause of death has not yet been revealed, law enforcement said that Perry died in an apparent drowning in his Los Angeles home. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure it was recording.
It is.
It is? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. While Perry was best known for his role in Friends, he appeared in scores of other television shows, including Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, The Good Wife, and the revived The Odd Couple, and comedic films including Fools Rush In, The Whole Nine Yards, Three to Tango, The Kid, and many more movies. But it was Chandler Bing who he portrayed over 10 seasons and over the course of more than 200 episodes, which endeared him to fans. Lines like, "Could I be more," add quip here, inspired video montages and endless quotes, alongside the ensemble cast comprising Jennifer Aniston, Lisa Kudrow, David Schwimmer, Courtney Cox, and Matt LeBlanc. He embodied his character, augmenting his hilarious and sarcastic lines with facial expressions that almost bordered on breaking character, but adding to his charm. That was in some ways by design, as he told Dateline in 2004. The Friends creators took all of us to lunch separately and said, "Tell us about yourself." And I remember saying two things. I am not an unattractive man, but I'm just awful with women. That's a character you haven't seen before. And I also am not comfortable with any silence at all. I have to break any awkward moment or silence with a joke. And what better character for a sitcom is that? It's a built-in excuse for him to be funny. Matthew was an incredibly generous actor. There was no single time I stepped onto a stage with him that I did not feel lifted by his brilliance. Maggie Wheeler, the actress who portrayed Perry's on-again, off-again girlfriend Janice, said in a statement, even in his darkest moment, his comedic timing was impeccable. Matthew suffered so terribly, as his book revealed to the world. I hope he is at peace beyond that suffering. He died way too soon, and he will be missed by all who loved and who knew him in life and as the beloved Chandler Bing. While Perry's humorous side is what made him famous and boosted Friends' popularity, his personal life was dark and serious. He suffered from addiction to alcohol and drugs, including painkillers. He served several stints in rehab, including while he was a cast member on Friends. Perry candidly addressed his struggles in his memoir, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing, which arrived last fall. The memoir, which covered his life from childhood through his megastardom in Friends and ensuing sobriety, was a hit, reaching #1 on the Amazon best-selling nonfiction chart the week it debuted. His unvarnished look at his addictions was on full display, opening with the line, "Hi, my name is Matthew, although you may know me by another name. My friends call me Maddie, and I should be dead." And later admitting he was taking up to 55 Vicodin a day during the filming of the 3rd season of Friends. In one passage, he said he was set to appear opposite Meryl Streep in Don't Look Up, but had to leave the film after suffering a medical scare that saw his heart stopping for 5 minutes and ribs broken as he was resuscitated. I was given the shot at 11 a.m., he writes. I woke up 11 hours later in a different hospital. Apparently, the propofol had stopped my heart for 5 minutes. It wasn't a heart attack. I didn't flatline, but nothing had been beating. I was told that some beefy Swiss guy really didn't want the guy from Friends dying on his table and did CPR on me for the full 5 minutes, beating and pounding my chest. If I hadn't been on Friends, would he have stopped at 3 minutes? Did Friends save my life again? He added. He may have saved my life, but he also broke 8 of my ribs. Perry was born on August 19, 1969, in Plymouth, Massachusetts, to Canadian journalist Suzanne Morrison, who served as the press secretary for former Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau and American actor John Perry. His parents divorced before he turned 1, and his mother married Canadian broadcaster Keith Morrison. Perry was raised in Canada and moved to Los Angeles at age 15 to pursue acting. He focused on improvisational comedy, which he studied at LA Connection in Sherman Oaks while still attending high school. And then from NPR.com, Perry was cast in Friends, the sitcom that shot him to fame at age 24. He starred as Chandler for the sitcom's entire 10-season run, a sarcastic yet affable commitment phobe who later found love with the type A Monica Geller, Courtney Cox. I loved Chandler. I loved the show, and I also knew, remember this, because it's going to be the best time of your life, Perry said in an ABC News Nightline interview with Diane Sawyer last year. But behind the scenes, Perry struggled with addiction. He opened up about his decades-long excessive use of alcohol and pills in his memoir published last year. In the book, which he dedicated to fellow sufferers of addiction, he detailed his painful struggle with drug use and his related health problems. He said he'd spent half of his life in treatment, detoxed an estimated 65 times, and underwent 14 surgeries. Whenever I bumped into something that I didn't really want to share, I would think of the people that I would be helping, and it would keep me going, the actor told the New York Times last year. While on set, Perry said he tried to keep his addictions hidden and described his unhealthy relationship with his work. I felt like I was going to die if the live audience didn't laugh. And that's not healthy for sure, Perry wrote in the memoir. But I could sometimes say a line and the audience wouldn't laugh, and I would sweat and sometimes go into convulsions. If I didn't get the laugh I was supposed to get, I would freak out. I felt that every single night. This pressure left me in a bad place. I also knew of the 6 people making that show, only one of them was sick. Perry received an Emmy nomination for his Friends role and 2 more for his dramatic turn as Associate White House Counsel on The West Wing. Perry also starred in several films, including Fools Rush In, The Whole 9 Yards, 17 Again, and the TV show Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. Born in Massachusetts, the actor was raised in various parts of Canada, often traveling between the homes of his split parents in Los Angeles and Montreal. In Canada, he became a nationally ranked junior tennis player. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, a childhood friend, thanked Perry for bringing laughter to both the schoolyard and when they were young and to millions of people around the world. And as an aside, Perry and a friend beat up schoolmate Trudeau in the 5th grade. And then lastly, from the LA Times, there was a dark side to the life of one of television's most beloved funnymen, however. In his 2022 memoir, Perry recounted his lifelong struggle with addiction to alcohol and opioids. He wrote that he had his first drink at 14, but didn't recognize the signs of alcoholism until 21. Since then, he estimated he'd spent more than $7 million on efforts to get sober, including multiple stints in rehab. His substance abuse also led to a number of serious health issues, including a 5-month hospitalization in 2018 following a colon rupture that left him, he wrote, with a 2% chance to live through the night. And it was fueled, he acknowledged, during a Friends reunion special in 2021 by the pressure to land the joke in front of a live studio audience night after night. Nobody wanted to be famous more than me, Perry told the Times in April, discussing Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing at the Festival of Books. I was convinced it was the answer. I was 25. It was the second year of Friends, and 8 months into it, I realized the American dream is not making me happy, not filling the holes in my life. I couldn't get enough attention. Fame does not do what you think it's going to do. It was all a trick. Though Perry estimated he had relapsed 60 or 70 times since first getting sober in 2001, he maintained a steady presence on American television, playing key parts in backstage dramedy, Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, and therapy sitcom Go On, and making a steady stream of guest appearances on acclaimed shows such as The West Wing and The Good Wife. Since his near-death experience in 2018, Perry had found solace in Friends, frequent games of pickleball, and especially writing. Though producing his book had forced him to relive his darkest moments, it also connected him to all the sufferers out there. I had a story to tell, a story that could really help people, he wrote, and helping others had become the answer for me. Indeed, for all his success as an actor, and more recently as a best-selling memoirist, Perry told the Times in April that his work was not the center of what he hoped would be his legacy. Asked how he'd like to be remembered, he said, as a guy who lived life, loved well, lived well, and helped people. That running into me was a good thing and not something bad. Whew, that's a lot, huh? So, Michelle, I think, were you going to talk about some of the points in his chart?
Sure. Yeah, I just want to honor this soul, may he rest in peace, and may all that we share, speak about relative to his signatures in his chart also contribute to the legacy that he wanted to leave, which was about laughter and love and being, really being a gift in the world. And I think that he was, right? Even I was reading about his different experiences, and a part of what he did, which is such a strong signature in his chart, is that he exemplified the intensification of the end of deeper cycles of evolution in how his work, his rise to fame, his addictions, his relationship to the discomfort of being in a human body, and being in an emotional body. So some of the core signatures, obviously, he's a Leo rising, sun in Leo, ruling the ascendant. We have a Pluto in Virgo on the south node, with Mercury Balsamic to the south node, and Pluto in a new phase to the south node. and this Pisces Virgo nodal axis. This moon in Scorpio opposing Saturn, which was also the axis of the eclipse on his death. This activation of that particular archetype, the Scorpio moon in the 4th house, also with Neptune. And we have Mars moving into a square. It's like 9 degrees, or I don't know that I would necessarily. There are a lot of astrologers who would consider that square to the nodal axis. So I'll mention it, but Mars in Sagittarius. I also think it's interesting, his Mars in Sagittarius opposing Hygeia. This is the goddess of health and well-being in Gemini, who's ruled by that Mercury South Node, and how much of his social anxiety and the intense pressure to perform led to a lot of his health illness and addiction. Although many of the reports spoke about his addictions stemming from or at least his addiction to opioids stemming from a jet skiing accident. And throughout his life, he had many different accidents and various different crises, right? That Pluto South Node in a new phase, but that Mercury in a balsamic phase, it's a simultaneous evolution of a soul that it was coming in this lifetime to end a particular evolutionary cycle of guilt, humiliation, self-deprecation, and then opening a new cycle in which he, in his addictions, even in his darkness, used that to shed light and used that to be a beacon of hope and strength and support for others. And obviously the extreme excessiveness of his addictions. His Jupiter is in Libra in the 3rd house and is ruled by that Venus in Cancer in the 12th house. So those are the main signatures of the chart. As I say, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add. He also, I'll say, in terms of transits, he was he had a Chiron return in the last few years. What was the other, Saturn, the moon Saturn opposition was activated by the eclipse, was activated by the nodal transit last year, and the eclipses last year as well. Anyone else want to speak to anything in particular?
Well, all of the Mercury South Node, Pluto in the 2nd house in Virgo, showed his feeling very overly self-analytical and self-critical, and made him very uncomfortable, especially with that moon in opposition to Saturn. He had really deep, private, intense emotions that he had difficulty expressing opposed that Saturn. And then the Venus in the 12th house also made him uncomfortable in relationships, made him feel insecure in his relationships, because he had very high ideal, had very high vision for what he wanted or felt he needed, and he could never find that because it was such a high ideal, and he was so self-critical of himself in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that led to his falling back on drugs and alcohol to feel okay.
I think a part of what's interesting with that Venus being ruled by that Scorpio moon and Saturn being ruled by that Venus,
Mm.
the, I didn't read his memoir, but I don't know if it spoke to his relationship with his mother and the separation of his parents and how that influenced his feeling of safety, emotional safety.
Right.
This to me, the signature, especially with the Pluto and Virgo and the Mercury South Node and all of that, how interwoven the internal experience of guilt and shame and lack of emotional stability
Hmm.
and the self-judgment, the pressure to perform, the it's like I what I feel and sense in that is being in a constant state of internal rejection,
Right. He was a deeply sensitive soul.
seeking the external approval,
Right.
via laughter, right, to alleviate this inner experience of not only alienation, but shame and unworthiness. Unworthiness is the word that I was looking for.
Right.
Yeah, there was clearly something going on because I remember, I think it was in the Wikipedia biography, it talked about he started acting out when he was 10 years old, and then and started drinking when he was 14. I mean, beat up Justin Trudeau when in 5th grade. That's
Right. And with that moon and Neptune being in Scorpio in the 4th and the Venus being in the 12th, a lot of it was very inaccessible to his consciousness. There was a lot of unconscious emotional stuff that he felt but couldn't really identify where it was coming from.
Yeah.
And
I
then that
think
Mars in Sagittarius, he had that need to really express himself larger than life, and express his visions to, later in life, it turned into expressing his vision for higher ideals and wanting to help others.
mm-hmm.
yeah, that together with the sun and Leo in the 1st house,
Right.
he
Where
did shine.
Yeah, for sure.
Very brightly. And
Yes, he was a shining light.
yeah, yeah.
He ended up becoming a spokesperson for the National Drug Council, and so that this is one of those themes where a soul is commanded with such leadership around something that is otherwise considered so dark or taboo or secret, right? He's struggled so much, but then his capacity to take his experiences and make them examples, or make them healing, make them transformative, right? Scorpio being the capacity to the phoenix to transform. He was able to transcend the limitations of his own personal identity and become a spokesperson, become someone who was helpful and healing to a huge community of people struggling with addiction and recovery. And he didn't one of the things of the recovery of the world of recovery is the sense of being out of control, right? Out of control of our addictions, out of control of our experience, not being able to control his emotions, not being able to control his anxiety, his fear, his insecurities being larger than he could internally deal with.
And,
Right.
and then he ended up channeling it into service by, I mean, he created a recovery house. I mean, he actually bought a house and made it a recovery.
A lot of that
facility.
is him fulfilling that North Node in Pisces in the 8th house. I mean,
Yeah.
helping people to transform and heal through his own sacrifice and, reaching those spiritual ideals.
And going to those deep places too.
Right.
Yeah.
So he moved into that North Node, and that was ultimately, like the direction for his journey. And he completed that.
So shall we move on to the actual event chart?
Yeah.
So these are the transits for this is the actual, the time of the police arriving. Apparently the paramedics had arrived about 3 minutes earlier, and his assistant had reportedly found him in the hot tub and had pulled him out. And they pronounced him dead on the scene. So this is probably about the time that they pronounced him dead. And so his death, occurred, sometime between the eclipse and this time.
And there's Neptune on the ascendant.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Interestingly, the Neptune on the ascendant, I think of reflecting both the potentiality for substances and or the sort of mysterious, we're not quite sure of how this occurred, as well as being
Water.
underwater. Saturn retrograde in the 12th house.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also his North Node in Pisces.
Mhm. And that point that you have in the chart, Sue, karma.
Uh-huh.
It's interesting, and many of the charts that has a significant, there seems to be signatures with karma relative to, I'm not as familiar with that aspect, but I noticed it right away with the Saturn and also in one of the other charts that we're using.
Yes, it's an asteroid, the asteroid Karma, and it has been, recently traveling with Saturn, which I find very, very.
For the world.
Who's that at 18 degrees Virgo on the conjunct the Venus? Is that the nodes of Venus?
That is yes, it's the south node of Venus at 22 degrees Scorpio. Is that what you're talking about?
No,
no,
at
Virgo.
Virgo.
Oh, yeah, that's the north node of Mercury.
The north node of Mercury.
Yeah.
Okay.
And okay, so in some of these charts, and Robin and I have talked about it, Mercury and Jupiter both. I'm fascinated by death charts. I guess it's all my progressed Scorpio and my Mars in Scorpio, but I just because it seems to show the culmination, what it all comes down to, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of charts that I've seen show connections with Mercury and or Jupiter. And I've read astrologers' takes on it that both Mercury and Jupiter signify trips, of the, short distance and long distance variety, and transition from, out of this life into into the nether worlds is, certainly a journey.
Well, wasn't that part of Mercury's job to help carry people from,
Yeah,
That,
Mercury goes back and forth from
right.
between the worlds. Yes. Yeah. So
Yeah. I also find that obviously Pluto and the eighth house are often
mhm.
strong correlations in death charts
Right. And in this
and
chart,
eclipses
yeah, right. Yeah.
and birthdays.
Yeah. Yeah. And in this chart, we have kind of almost a natural wheel with Scorpio in the eighth house, but
Mhm.
a little skewed because it's got Neptune on the ascendant. So we've got other other parts included, shall we say. But look at the heavy emphasis in the second and eighth house again, like in his chart.
Yeah. Maybe why don't you bring up that tri-wheel? So, because then we can see,
Yeah.
um, how his progressed moon was right on his progressed Saturn. The moon was on his progressed Saturn and right on the eclipse degree.
Hmm.
And
And then
Mars was opposing Jupiter exactly, and opposing his natal Saturn, and the progressed moon was on his natal moon and the eclipse. And Venus was
Transiting his south node, transiting his Mercury.
right,
Yeah.
and his progressed Venus and
Mhm.
progressed ascendant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
yeah, this to me is just incredible. All of this, all of this Virgo is being definitely set off and accented and oof.
I mean, all these correlations of everything being so exactly lined up to me represents a culmination.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So my observation is that okay, so the fourth house in traditional astrology and the eighth house is what people look at, in depth charts. So the ruler of the fourth house or the end of life, Venus, right here,
Mm-hmm.
and the
And Jupiter,
and Jupiter up
which
here.
is right, opposing his Mercury. Oh no, opposing Mercury, but opposing
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
his moon.
Exactly. Jupiter and Mercury opposing, and then the eighth house ruler in the eighth house, Neptune.
Mm-hmm.
Opposite the fourth house ruler. Let's see. Anything else? Oh, and then
Well, yeah, on that solar return chart, yeah, Saturn is his perfection year. Saturn was the ruler. And
okay, let me get rid of all the. You move on to the perfection chart.
yeah.
Yeah, let's okay. Well, guess we're gonna have to do it this way. Oh. I have to do them one at a time. Zoom changed something again, so I can't
Can't clear all.
can't clear all. I don't find it. I'll have to look. There we go. All right, moving on.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, so he was 54. So the seventh house was his perfection year, which was ruled by Aquarius in his chart, with Saturn as planetary ruler. And in the relocated solar return, that puts Saturn in his eighth house, which correlates with death, and Neptune on the midheaven opposing the moon on his IC in Virgo, conjunct Mars and the Mercury. And he had a Cancer ascendant, so that emphasized the moon even more, and the fourth house. And his north node was conjunct Chiron in the 10th.
And in that chart also, it looks like all of those, the Mercury, Mars, Moon, it are all late degree Virgo
Mhm.
Right.
degrees on there, but I'm going to assume that that's somewhere near that Pluto south node.
Yeah,
Oh,
that-
right. And also Pluto is in the seventh house, which is his perfected year house for that year.
Right there.
yeah, this appears to be about, I see a mark at about 24 degrees Virgo. So, I mean, yeah.
So that would put Mars right on his natal Pluto.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and that would activate his Pluto,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mercury.
which is in the
Mercury
seventh house in his perfected house.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Interesting.
And then looking at it, okay. Mm. Now I,
And this is the solar return that's not relocated,
yeah, this would be for his birth location.
right? Which puts Saturn in his perfected house,
Mm-hmm. Seventh house. Yep.
and it puts Neptune in his eighth with Chiron.
Right. And then all of this Virgo again in the second house,
Mhm.
or some of the Virgo. But and to your point, Michelle, his Pluto is right about here.
Oh, and it puts Jupiter on the MC.
Right, that's right. Yeah.
Yes, conjunct Uranus.
And you can see in that solar return, Venus is in the 12th house, which it was also the signature of his birth.
Right.
She's retrograde in Leo and ruling the south node there, right at in the third house, with Pluto squaring the nodes. So.
And again,
Kind of-
Venus in the 12th house. And the other thing is the Venus retrograde Venus is retrograde on his on the solar return. So and it stationed retrograde right around his sun.
Mhm.
So he would have had 3 passes of Venus over his sun as well recently.
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges of as using a celebrity is that we can't really know what the conditions of his life
True.
were in this last year of his life, but I would imagine with everything that's reflected in this Pluto square in the 6th house, with the Saturn, Neptune in the 7th and the 8th, with all that Virgo, especially the moon in Virgo at 29 degrees, kind of culminating on Mars there, that whatever the soul dynamics that he'd been working with his entire life had reached during these last few months of his life, sort of a critical mass. And with evolution, I've been saying this a lot lately, evolution happens through the emotional body.
Mhm.
and without being able to, remain in a place of sobriety and cultivate an ability to feel his feelings, to work through his own internalized unworthiness, from a pattern perspective. Wherever we face these repeated, evolution is a ongoing process, right? And this has been really clear to me in these last eclipses, that no matter how deeply we might desire change, and he exemplified that in many ways, like he was able to get sober again and again and again. Like he didn't ever give up on giving up the substances, and he yet still was often called back into a relationship with his feeling body, where it was problematic for him.
Oh, yeah, that moon in Scorpio in the 4th house.
Yeah.
And with this Pluto square, just for all of us in general, the intensification of the square is the crisis in consciousness. It is, do we resist evolution, or do we cooperate? Are we are we in a state of perpetuating the patterns, or alleviating them? And here we have also this moon Baslamic to the south node, but in a new phase with Mars. I mean, I think on some level, no matter what, his soul was always working with changing and evolving, becoming better, right? Virgo is a process of purification.
Right.
Where even if we are quote unquote failing, like from a Saturn perspective, you could consider rehab as getting sober, and then relapse is some sort of failure, but it's always leading us towards greater evolution. It's always, and he used the experiences of his repeated failures in that respect to inspire and serve and help others. And he wrote about it, Mercury, and all this, leaving the legacy, south node in the 3rd house, Mercury, Mars, moon in the 1st house. There's some legacy that he's leaving with his presence that allows people through his words. And this would be really a call to, again, hearing those words from his story, to see how we can heal those deeper places, no matter what, like at all, given all odds.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah. And when you think about it, either from a traditional astrology perspective or a modern astrology, Jupiter and Neptune are the rulers of his north node.
Right.
And so, they're definitely playing in with this, and perfecting is a Virgo thing. And I always air quote failure, because failure is, there is an element of trying in any failure.
Yeah.
The effort is still made.
It's what develops character. I don't think that there's any human being on this planet that cannot, like, failure is often used as a way to demoralize ourselves, but it's actually not that at all. It's the capacity of resilience that is reflected through whatever willingness we bring to continuing to
Ever ourselves.
face our own evolution.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is
I really feel, I mean, having done this, I really, I mean, I can certainly identify, because I have the South Node in Virgo. I have, you know, in my third house. So, I mean, and the Sun and Saturn. So, I mean, perfection is always at the back of my mind. You know, everything has to be perfect. If it's not perfect, then I failed. And I can see that with him, is that he was so he wanted so much to get those laughs, to shine, to be, you know, to be perfect. And he felt like he failed, you know, time after time. But
Even though he didn't.
even though he did, right. Exactly.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Definitely. Chandler Bing was one of my favorite characters on TV. So
He was very loved by millions of people.
yeah, very, very much so. And I mean, it's showing with all the, you know, the outpouring of condolences and, you know, tributes to him. So let's see, shall we move on to I think we have another
1984.
yeah, move on to his yeah, kind of go back in history a little bit.
When he first moved to LA to study acting.
Yeah, he had been having trouble. He was going back and forth, was my take on it, but a number of things happened, and so he decided, or as a family, maybe they decided that he would move to LA.
Right, and it's when he started getting started using a lot of alcohol.
Right.
That
Yeah.
time.
Well, yeah, that's what the biographies say, is he started drinking when he was 14. So here we go. Here's his solar return.
Hygeia was in his 6th house, approaching his 7th.
With karma. There's karma again.
Right. That's in his natal.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 So the
And
solar return Hygeia with his natal karma. And
Saturn was on his moon, and the moon
was on his Saturn, basically.
Yeah, was on Saturn.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that shows, you know.
And his North Node was kind of on, and his Chiron was exactly on Hygeia and his North Node. I mean, not his. The North Node and Chiron were on his Hygeia.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Chiron was exactly on Hygeia. So right. Yeah. So another 2 Hygeia. Here, I'm falling down on my annotation. So here's Chiron right here, and Hygeia here on karma, and Chiron on Hygeia. And
there's Mercury and Venus again in the 2nd house, transiting over his Mercury and South Node.
Yeah. And square Mars.
Right.
And the nodes. Look at that too. And Uranus. So this was a time when Uranus was conjunct the South Node. And I think the biggest thing I noticed was here, Pluto conjunct the IC, which you know,
and at the 29 degree Libra.
At 29 degrees Libra, conjunct the IC, which kind of is a traditional indication of change in, moving, moving home, change in
Right.
living condition. Yeah. Let's see, anything else of note? Yeah, I think this, set
Well, that South Node and
the moon on Saturn
Uranus
and
are-
Saturn on the moon.
right, and then the South Node and Uranus are activating his Mars.
Yeah.
And that's why he moved to LA, was because he wanted to pursue acting and put himself out and expand his horizons in Sagittarius and fully express himself. Shine his light.
Yeah, and
Neptune was progressed into his fifth house also
transiting.
with Jupiter.
Right,
Transiting.
yeah.
Transited into with Jupiter into his fifth house. So also to
creativity.
Yes, expand his creativity and shine his light.
Yeah.
Start a new journey.
And the Neptune and Jupiter are trine his sun.
Which gave him success.
Yeah, his Leo shining self.
Right. It helped him to express all that creative potential that he had.
Yeah, he definitely was. He was a quick wit with all that Virgo and a shining light with the Leo sun ruling his ascendant, for sure.
And Mars in the fifth house, and Mars in Sagittarius. Yeah.
Yeah,
in the fifth house.
In the fifth house. Yeah. Okay, so let's back out all these, and then we can move on to when
Debut of Friends.
Yeah. So let's see, what have we here? I think the biggest thing.
Venus is transiting his moon, his progressed moon. And the third.
Right here, yeah. And
South Node is right. It was transiting right over his progressed Saturn and his natal Saturn. Up in the 10th house.
Yeah, I was definitely getting ready to.
No, it's exact.
No, it's 18. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's within 10 degrees, which is EA.
Yeah.
So it's definitely.
I was saying 8.
Well, and the sun on the South Node in the progressions also, the Virgo sun.
Right next to his South Node.
Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, right. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. In the second house.
Yeah.
Right.
And again, here his South Node didn't move very much, which I find, this is 1984. So, he's 25. In 25 years, it moved 12 minutes, which to me is unusual. I think that just conjecture that his fate, destiny was pretty fixed and didn't, it didn't veer off much from where he was born. to me.
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
You know, he just kind of stayed on a trajectory that was set, maybe not set, but you know, determined, predetermined, possibly.
Right.
Yeah, let's see if I got any notes about this. Well, one thing is that I noticed is Chiron transiting Virgo. So it would have, you know, in time gone over all of these. Exacerbating all of this, all of the Virgo, and you know, bringing it all, you know, more into focus over the next few years.
And Neptune, transiting Neptune and Uranus in his 6th house also would have been trine his south node and trine his Pluto.
True. Yeah. Let's see. Anything else that stands out?
The transiting Jupiter was right on top of his natal moon.
Transiting Jupiter. Oh, is
It's
it right here? I have.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And the other thing I just noticed also, Saturn is opposite Chiron in the sky for, you know, for everyone, but
Right.
that may to me indicates, you know, difficulty, emotional difficulty perhaps, and you know, the I mean, this was his, you know, this is when things escalated as far as his drug use, I think. Escalated even more, shall we say, or began to escalate, I would say.
Right. I suppose there was more pressure on him because this was, you know, something that he had to do on a regular basis quite often, you know, to be able to put himself out there and perform.
Yeah.
And
what was it he
try
said?
to get the laughs.
Yeah, that he would, if it was filmed before a live audience, and if the audience didn't laugh, he would go into convulsions. I'm not sure if that was literal or figurative.
So
I think it was
figurative. A lot of pressure for somebody with all that Virgo.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. So shall we move on to let's see.
Friends say goodbye.
Okay.
Yeah. So when Friends ended, the lunar eclipse in 2004 was within that 6-degree window of when Friends ended, and 2 days after the lunar eclipse in Scorpio was the Metonic cycle. So the eclipse that happened in 2004 was part of a Metonic cycle, and was connected to the eclipse that happened on October 28th, was it?
Yeah.
The day that he died.
Yeah.
So those two eclipses were connected.
Yeah, that year was the same set of eclipses that we have this year. So,
Right.
the 2 days 2 days before a lunar eclipse in Scorpio, I think it was 14 something Scorpio, was when Friends ended. And then 6 months later was the basically the same configuration as when he died.
Same. Right.
With
which I think
the
is pretty
nodes
amazing.
different though.
Right. But still, it was on that same degree that Taurus, Scorpio 5 degrees, which was like so heavily impacted his, was aspecting his chart so heavily. And so that was when Friends said goodbye. And then the next eclipse is when he said goodbye.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well put.
It corresponds with those transits corresponded with Venus, his also the Venus cycle, Venus South Node, Venus Pluto, and his Jupiter return as well.
Right.
Okay.
There's Jupiter. Mars was pretty close, but yeah, his progressed Jupiter.
Yeah, well, yeah, his natal Jupiter is almost
Right.
the same degree, and yeah, and progressed Uranus is in here too to add a little flavor. The other thing I noticed is that his progressed Sun had just moved into Libra.
Right.
At that point, which to me, when a progressed Sun changes signs, to me it's like changing the channel. I mean, it's
right, starting a new chapter.
Yeah, a new chapter, exactly. Yeah. And Venus, here with right there about to change signs as well, but still hanging out in Virgo with karma and his Pluto and stuff. So I mean the Virgo stuff is definitely still with him. The other thing I noticed is that Saturn is square the nodes here. Saturn in Cancer. Which in his 12th house. Could not have been easy. I would think that it might have, some emotions would have been suppressed, shall we say.
Right.
That had to have been a really difficult time.
Yeah, well, with the South Node and Sun in the 4th house too. So,
yeah,
definitely a lot of suppressed feelings.
Yeah,
emotions.
And endings.
Yes.
Okay, do we have one more? Yeah, I think we do. Oh. Oh, that's it. So, any observations? Oh, I do. I do have some observations that with what I looked at, and I mean I kind of said it already, but his second house containing Virgo and his 8th house containing Pisces, were Mercury and Neptune, and then his 4th house was Libra on the cusp, ruled by Venus, and then it all lined up, on that fateful day, which
the correlations were so strong. I mean, yeah, it to me seems like when everything is such strong correlations like that it was divine timing and a life well lived that met its purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's logical conclusion,
Right.
or it's yeah.
So he's off to another journey.
Yeah, yeah. And will definitely be well remembered, that's for sure. He
Yeah, as much pain and suffering as he went through in his life, I feel like he really met the objective that his soul had planned for him.
well, and what he said, the last line in the intro was asked how he'd like to be remembered. He said how he'd like to be remembered. He said, as a guy who lived life, loved well, lived well, and helped people. That
North Node in Pisces in the 8th house.
yeah, that running into me was a good thing, not something bad.
Right.
And I think it was.
May his life be remembered as a blessing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any other final thoughts, or does everybody feel complete on this?
Yeah, I mean, just want to mention one of our pre-show discussions was around past life and ideas and thoughts, and that I think will be a great topic for us to explore in our next chit chat. I know that it's Halloween, and this is and we're close to the Day of the Dead, and it felt appropriate to explore death charts and the soul and the context of this greater reality in this moment, even if it is quite a sobering discussion.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, like I said, I just love looking at death charts, because it does show the completion of a life. It just shows that there is a
Purpose.
a plan to this. Yeah.
Yes.
Some sort of a divine plan that
The Course in Miracles has a line that says the script is written, and it's this whole premise that the entire reality is already prescribed as we know it, which also brings up the questions of how fate and free will interact with one another.
yeah.
That's something fun to explore as well.
Yeah, I think different. There are varying
Viewpoints.
viewpoints and degrees of how much fate and free will and
Right. Yeah, we really can't know. We can only hypothesize and intuit. But yeah, I hate to think that we don't have any free will. I don't know that I could subscribe to that.
yeah.
I also believe a lot is fated.
Yeah, destined. And perhaps they both, they go together, and
Like time and space.
yeah, and that maybe the destiny changes as the free will. I have always thought that each decision point that we reach leads to
a different timeline.
Yeah, I mean, there's a why at each
Right.
one, and
We go anywhere in between, and
Yeah.
each decision steers which one of those within that framework.
Yeah, if you choose this one, then
Right.
then you have these. If you
Right.
choose this one, then you have these. So yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought.
Yeah. Well, we can chit chat about that.
Sounds great. Thank you all.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Yeah.
Next time.
Until next time.
Until next time.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.